Okay, so thank you all for being on the panel and for sharing your experiences. So let's just go around the table from left to right. If you just want to introduce yourselves, name, pronouns, and then what your title is, and kind of a little bit about the kind of research that you do or how you got into genomics.
Hello. Wow, so professional with my mic here. My name is Ben. I'm a third-year grad student here in Genome Sciences. I'm working in the lab of Andrew Sturgachis. I want to say he's one of the newer PIs here, but he's been here for 3 or 4 years now. But we generally study gene regulation. And we do that at the level of chromatin, which is how proteins interact with DNA. And so that's kind of my field. How I got into genetics wasn't super intentional. I was pre-med for like the first 2 years of college. I actually went to community college for 2 years. Started doing research as a junior. And then mostly through the labs I was in, I got really interested in genetics because it seemed like a lot of the problems I was interested in, the root of those puzzles was in the genome with genetics. So I really like the idea of like starting from the ground and then discovering from there. And I feel like genetics is a really great place to kind of start at a base foundational level. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, my name is Melinda. I am a research scientist in Doug Fowler's lab here in Genome Sciences, and we are mostly working on variants of uncertain significance in clinically relevant genes and trying to understand functional consequences of mutating amino acids in a protein sequence. And like Ben, I don't think I really got into genetics or genomics intentionally. I took a couple of classes in undergrad at University of Oregon, where I was actually studying marine biology, and was kind of interested in like molecular biology and DNA. And then I went on to do a master's degree also in marine science. And I was working in a lab that was using genetic markers to track invertebrate, non-indigenous species in bays in California. So yeah, I've just kind of, it's been woven through my scientific career.
Hi, good Mike. So I'm David, he, his. I'm a computational biologist now at Shape Therapeutics. And I guess like as of a year and a half ago, as a graduate student here at University of Washington in genome sciences. So here at UW, I was in Cole Trapnell's lab, which does lots of like single cell genomics tech dev, especially kind of things. And then now at Shape, it's a gene therapy company, and I work mostly on the like viral engineering side of the company of trying to re-engineer naturally occurring viruses such that you can deliver gene therapies to different parts of the body in a better way on various ways. So yeah, I got into genetics, I would say almost just kind of by fusing together the things I liked most in science. I didn't set out to be a geneticist, I would say. Like even my job now, I'm probably closer to like biochemistry, bioengineering than true genetics anymore. But like I really enjoyed particularly sort of the computational quantitative side of science. I really, really like biology, and I think genetics is an awesome place where all those come together. Sort of as we were seeing about the massive data, lots of ways that computation is super, super nice. Genetics, to me, is probably the premier place in biology where you use computation the most. So I think it was just kind of a happy blend together. And yeah, I jumped over to industry, been loving the corporate shill life. Lots of propaganda on that. Happy to talk your ear off. It's been treating me very well.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex. I'm a first year master's student in data science and actually a part of the GRTDS program that Adam was just talking about. And kind of my intro to genetics was, I guess, quite a different path. I actually studied engineering in my undergrad, and I hadn't taken any biology class since my freshman year of high school. So that's been kind of a big learning curve on there, but it's been a really cool opportunity kind of merging my interest in data science and medical technology kind of in the genomics landscape. And kind of what Adam talked about and David just mentioned here is like all that data, there's just so much opportunity for computational sides and lots of really interesting problems in machine learning and deep learning, which are stuff that I've been really interested in. And so currently I'm working at Fred Hutch Cancer Center in Dr. Gavin Ha's lab, and I'm working on a project where we're predicting gene expression from cell-free DNA using some different deep learning techniques.
Thank you very much. This is one of my favorite things on career panels is hearing about the diverse ways that people didn't know they wanted to get into the thing that they got into and how they got into it. I just always love that. And on that line, I'm going to ask, what advice would you give to other folks that are looking to get into the similar positions as you? What advice would you give them on their pathway there? Or what advice would you give yourself when you were starting your career path? And let's start with Ben and work our way to the right.
Yeah. So I went out of high school into college being a starry, doe-eyed pre-med, as I think a lot of like undergrads in science are a majority. But it was interesting at community college because I think the path was less clear and the opportunities, or not the opportunities, but like some of the pre-requirements that are listed out for pre-med, like joining a student clinic or doing undergraduate research, were harder to get than at a four-year college. Now, that being said, I loved community college. I think it is like the best place to start your college career. I have lots of opinions on that, but a big promoter of community college. But that being said, I got to my undergrad, or I transferred to a four-year college and realized I was pretty far behind other people, like my peers who are also doing pre-med. And so that's when I got into trying to catch up and like get into undergraduate research. And that was really like where I transitioned, as I started doing undergraduate research, transitioned from being pre-med to being like, hey, working in the lab is actually really cool. There's a lot of fun stuff happening here. And I think I'm actually more inclined to be doing research than I am to be doing medicine. So that being said, I still did not have a very clear understanding of what the path into research is. And I think that's because there's definitely not like a single path. I think if you ask the like 70 grad students in GS, I'm not sure how many there are, you'll probably get 70 different stories of how they ended up getting into research and specifically genome sciences. So I think my advice is that it is not a clear path, which is actually great because that means there's many different ways you can get to where you want to be. But I think what it really requires is just trying a lot of things and talking to a lot of people. I think as an undergrad, I don't know how much time I have. I'm just kind of rambling here. I'm back for one more minute.
Great, yeah.
When I started looking for undergraduate positions, I like did not know like what was out there or like who to talk to. And I would look at like lab websites and like read their research. And the picture of the PI would be from like 15 years ago. So you would get catfish both on what the PI looks like and what research they were doing, because these websites aren't often updated that much. So I think really the best advice I have is to come to something like this, meet people who are currently working in labs, and do a lot of networking and talking to people, because I think it's the people who are working in the labs that will give you the best advice and the best picture of what the opportunities are that are out there. So yeah, just follow your curiosity and network. I guess that's like my current advice.
Excellent, thank you.
That was a really good answer. And I kind of found the same thing when I was coming out of undergrad and looking for a graduate program where you're right, like one, the PI sometimes wouldn't even answer you when you sent them an email asking if they had room for a graduate student. And then, yeah, like photos are from 15 or 20 years ago. The papers haven't been updated for several years. So I think the only thing I would add to what Ben said is to ask questions. and don't be afraid to ask questions. That is something that I wish I learned a little bit earlier in my career. So like just ask what people are working on, ask how they like it, ask what their challenges are, what like things are going really well for them. And I mean, I'm also coming from a seemingly large like field shift, right? Coming from marine science to more like heavily focus on human health and genomics. It's just something that I've found to help me over the last 2 years that I've been here, is just asking a lot of questions and trying to understand as much as I can and be as collaborative as I can.
Yeah, already a couple of really great answers. I think what I've been thinking of going into this is some ways an echo of the like talk to people, try things. And I guess maybe one particular angle I've noticed is I would say like really try to talk to a lot of people. And if you can, try to talk to people with a bunch of different backgrounds. Because one thing I've noticed, especially like when I was wrapping up grad school the last couple of years, I tried to do a ton of like grabbing people for informational interviews and getting like every professor who would listen to get their hot takes on stuff. And like some individual pieces of advice were like really bad advice. So just to flag that, if like you talk to someone particularly who's like only worked in academia, and sometimes they give you some like wrong ideas of tips for like industry research. And like that's just human nature, such as advice. But like I think just like to emphasize that of like, particularly if you end up on the PhD track, I think you're gonna end up with like years and years of getting bombarded with like premierly academia information, and it's good to keep like your head up about what's going on in the world. So just like really try to like feel a room and get a bunch of different inputs, and like don't be afraid of like recognizing when someone is giving advice that was great for them, but it's not great for you. And then other piece of advice, this is like much easier said than done, but I'd say especially for a lot of these like application processes is like, if you can, like as much as you can harden your soul against rejection, the happier you'll be, because like it really is not about you sometimes. Like I especially just went through the like, biotech application process, and I've had about a year of being on the interview side of things, and like people miss out on jobs for no good reason. Like they just happen to have done something that wasn't quite what a hiring manager wanted to see. You can see this for like if there's a graduate program or a research program, like it is not about you, and it is not some like stamp of failure to even have like a whole wave of applications wipe out. Like such is the game. And I know that's like way easier said than done, but like it really is not a mark of permanent failure. It just like is an unfortunate part of the game. So like anything you can do to try and like, I don't know, talk to people who are outside of research, or just like anything you do to keep your head above water on that is really helpful, because it's part of the game.
Yeah, these have all been really great points. I think one thing that I will add, and this is a bit cliche, but really just taking advantage of any opportunity that you get that you think might be interesting, even if you don't feel like you're necessarily super qualified for it. I guess that kind of goes for the GRTDS program as a whole, but like I mentioned, with very little background in biology or genetics at all, it was definitely like scary to kind of take that opportunity and run with it. And it's definitely been, a challenge learning a lot of the background of biology, learning what is DNA, what is RNA, like that was the first few days in the lab. But as I've like progressed throughout the year, it's been kind of really rewarding to like kind of learn that domain knowledge that's specific to, my lab, and then also be able to contribute in my own way. So giving expertise on the machine learning and the deep learning side has been kind of a really great combination. And I think that's something that I really wouldn't have been able to kind of grow if I had just, been like a little too scared of this opportunity. I'm going to wait for something that's like more familiar. I'm kind of being pushed out of my comfort zone has really helped me kind of grow a lot, and my confidence now in the future working in potentially in the like the biotech space is now a lot higher than it was previously.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything y'all had to say. And I was like, there's a lot of different opportunities that I didn't immediately jump on that eventually came around and turned out to be a really good thing for career path. So rather than me continuing to ask questions, I'm going to put it out to y'all in the audience to ask some questions about or for our career panelists here. Does anybody want to get us started? Leah.
I guess this would probably be a question for David. I heard you mention informational interviews, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and what your process was in terms of like setting those up and why and how it went.
Totally. So this was a thing that I guess, kind of been like advised to do by other people who are out in industry already. So this generally was just trying to like get people rambling for like lack of a real purpose. I guess I kind of wrote out some like questions to get things prompted of like, how long have you been at X company? What got you here? What do you wish you knew going in, kind of thing. Honestly, a lot of it was like boilerplate to get people rambling about just like what was your path, kind of like a mirror of what we're doing here in some ways. Setting it up was a lot of just like anyone I could get to talk to me. So it was like, I mostly was doing informational interviews the last year-ish of my PhD program. So by then, like, I knew enough people around the department who knew enough people that I was just kind of going through like lab mates or friends or anyone I knew who like, if people a couple years ahead of me had graduated, ended up in industry, or they had a friend who's industry, they had a partner who's in industry, I kind of just like worked through the network of people I knew or halfway knew. And people love talking about themselves. So it normally is like a fairly straightforward thing to just like, I would normally get a phone number or an email and shoot them a message of saying like, hey, I'm in X position in research life, looking at biotech. Can I chat to you sometime? And pretty much everyone was down for that. And it was definitely very, very helpful. There was definitely very different paths out there.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I'll add on is sometimes reaching out to a PI of a lab, they have very little time. And sometimes you can get a lot of leeway by reaching out to graduate students or postdocs in those labs. I know when I was a postdoc in the lab, in the lab that I was working in, I was always really excited if an undergraduate or a high school student reached out to ask me questions, partly because it made me feel really good about, oh, somebody's interested in my science, and in the back of my head, I knew they were looking at an in into the lab, but it was effective. It made me look at their resume and then bring that up to my PI, which had a big influence on the decisions we made. But then also we were, reviewing hundreds of different applications. And so oftentimes it's all about like what makes your application stand out from others. And then also knowing that because there are so many applications, not to take it personally, it's really hard to review those and look over them. And so you just keep trying. And one of my really good friends applied for her graduate program for 8 years before she got in. And then she got in, and now she's a MD, PhD, and is doing amazing work. But it took a very long time for her to get into that. So thanks. Any other questions? Oh, got a question to the left here.
Awesome that you all coming to talk to us. But as a question for the board here, before your current position, what is one piece of advice you wish someone told you?
Yeah, this is a tough question. I can hop on real quick.
Yeah.
Just wants to think of their things. I guess mine is like, because my last jump was going from like academic research to industry research. And this is like not a new thought. You're going to hear this any person you ask about this, but just like the pace of things is incredibly different between academia and industry. I've been super happy about that. I think that like the life cycle of an academic project in an academic lab is often measured in years, whereas in industry it's more typically in like months. And that is a lot nicer to me. I think some people find that like rushing and crushing. I really love the pace. But that like affects a lot of things in ways big and small, both for your like enjoyment of it. Also just kind of like the amount that you need to fit a job posting varies a lot. Like in industry, if you're only gonna be at a company a year or two, you need to be able to walk in and be effective within a month or two at most, which is not the case in academic environments. They're like, if you're doing like, especially a PhD with a 5 or 6 year life cycle, it is expected and totally fine to be wildly jumping fields. So I think just like, yeah, one more voice of that, you'll hear this from everyone, like the pace is wildly different out in biotech versus an academic lab. And it affects a bunch of ways from the the extent you can jump fields to your day-to-day life. So yeah, I would say that is something that is like good to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think there has been a lot of talk today about the computational side of genetics. And I started in genome science with like no computational skills. And I was very scared. And I think the advice I would give myself is that you can learn how to code. If you don't know how to code, you can learn how to code. There's a lot of amazing resources. There's like classes that we have here, as like there's classes everywhere. But if you are not computationally inclined and have no experience with coding, do not be afraid. That is a skill that you can acquire, and there is plenty of support to do so. So I guess that would be my advice, maybe for genetics specifically. But.
And I just want to interrupt and do a shameless plug for a high school summer program called Genome Hackers. If you're a high school student looking for some coding experience, I'm going to post a link on our website and you can apply for coming out this summer.
I think prior to coming here, a piece of advice that I would have liked to receive is like, don't be afraid of trying new things. Like whether it's new techniques or learning like new things about a field that you don't know about very deeply. And yeah, I think that would have helped a lot in my transition to this position.
I guess something I would add on to this, and this is also pretty cliche, but don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's super important, especially when you're trying to transition into a new domain. So within a lab, I think that the best resource you have available is the other students in the lab and your PI and other researchers there. So really like work on building those relationships with them, and don't be afraid to ask questions about whatever it is that can really help you kind of I guess patch up some of the holes in your knowledge, whether that's like from my perspective coming in and trying to learn all of the kind of genomics side, or you're coming from the opposite way, right? Trying to learn a lot of the computation side. I think leveraging like the skills of those around you is really just a great way to kind of boost yourself up.
Thank you.
I'll add one last thing real quick, is everyone has imposter syndrome. So just because you have imposter syndrome does not mean you're an imposter. So that feeling will likely exist, maybe not just in grad school, but in your life, but just know that it's a universal feeling and it should not stop you from following what you want to do.
And that's, I think, to yes and with the panelists, I think a lot of times when I was on a research project, my focus was so narrow and deep on my one topic that I didn't oftentimes kind of look up to see what's going on in the field or even with other projects in the lab. Like I was focused on what I was doing. And if I didn't have that awareness of emerging technologies or emerging kind of themes in other fields or like in completely other disciplines, you kind of get left behind in a way. And so sometimes with graduate students, I would say like, while you're learning, like you're building your tool belt for the future. And if you have this technique and this technique and this technique, if technique A that you initially were learning becomes obsolete, which it absolutely will, and if you've been in science as long as I have, it has gone obsolete multiple times. And the thing that took you 3 days to do, now you find out the genomicists here are doing in an afternoon. So yeah, keep your head on a swivel on that. Are there any other questions out there? Yes.
Thank you for saying that, not afraid to ask a question. That was kind of scary. My question is, how did you get your first letter of recommendation? Since, there are a lot of projects that need the letter of recommendations. And one thing, the first thing that popped to my mind is talk to professors. And what I was thinking is that I have to work for them to get the recommendation letter, since I have to let them know my characteristics, or how can I stand out among like 500 other students. But how can I engage in their work, or how do you network with them that make you stand out beside getting a super high grade and attend every office hours, that kind of thing?
I'm pulling somebody from the crowd for this.
So this is actually, could be an entire talk, to be quite honest. But letters of recommendation, for a lot of programs, there's a lot of different people that can write you a letter of recommendation. You can have someone in your life that has known you your whole life write you a letter of recommendation, because pretty much a letter of recommendation is showing the program that you are applying to a part of your character, whether that be a personal part of your character, your professional part of your character, or your academic part of your character. When I emphasize to like go to professors, your first best letter of recommendation that you can get is your academic. Because when you're going to your undergrad years, you're pretty much showing your academic prowess. So if you're going to a class and you're doing really well in the class, you are showing the professor that you can go to your discussions, engage with the material. It's showing your academic prowess. And the professors will know that you are performing because you're doing great in their class. And if you're going to office hours, that means that you actually care about the information. If you were talking to them about their research, it means that you want to think about the information. This is showing all of your academic prowess, and they can write an amazing letter of rec for you just based on that information. If you want someone to write you a letter of recommendation about your personal character, this is where you need to do outreach and get involved in different programs. So if you want to show that you're really passionate about like going and helping people get involved in research, like for me, one of my greatest letter of recs is from my faculty director when I was involved with the California Alliance Minority Participation over at my home institute. And he can attest to my personal interests of like helping other people. So that, and then when it comes to professional, that's when you're actually working in a lab and you're showing you're actually able to get the work done, you're actually able to show results, and you're able to actually perform the work. So when you actually apply to graduate school, that's the rule of three. Pretty much you have your academic, your personal, and your professional. And those are your strongest letters of rec for your graduate school. So that's why I say your first letter of rec should be your academic. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, please do. And apologies to the panelists for cutting.
So also as having taught some seminar courses here and written a letter for UW students, you can reach out to someone who teaches you and say, I would like you to write me a letter of rec about these things, because I feel like in your class, I exhibited these traits. And letter writers will love that because we know exactly what you want. And it's okay to like uptalk yourself and say, I think I did these things really good, and I'd like you to write me a letter about that. And that will make a letter writer's day, and it's not overstepping.
It's also good practice to give them plenty of notice, tell them when the date is, and then send them reminders. It's not rude to do that. Just don't send it every day, like weekly, or like, hey, this is due in 2 weeks, or hey, this is due next week, or hey, this is due tomorrow, because sometimes things get lost and people don't stay on top of it. Do y'all want to add anything to?
Yeah, if I could
thanks.
just add on to that. So it might not seem like you stand out in a class of 200 or 300 people, but I was an undergraduate TA when I was in college, and you definitely do. Like I TA'd a class of 250 people, and when I would grade people's homework or tests or whatever, I would recognize who was doing well and like who was showing up to office hours. So even if it doesn't seem like your professor knows who you are, your TA probably knows who you are, and your professor probably also knows who you are. So like my first letters of rec came from professors who sometimes I was in a smaller class for 50 people instead of 200 people, but it was because one, I did well in their classes, and two, I tried to talk to them either before class or after class just to like say hello or like that was a good lecture or, so that they know who you are and they recognize your face,
All right. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience members. Do you have a question here? No, we still have 15 more minutes. So if you have questions, we are happy to talk about them. And then also if you have questions, you can hold them and address anybody individually after the session. I'll be hanging around and yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. So maybe not in genomics, but do you want to bring the mic up?
Thank you. So Melinda, I might talk to you later as well, but this is a general panel question. So for example, Melinda, you volunteer at the Seattle Aquarium, or at least that's what the paper says. What kind of like non-work activities or like non-research based activities have you found helpful in your careers? That doesn't necessarily mean like genomics, but like a robotics club or different, I guess you could say, recreational activities have you found that kind of like bolster your knowledge or you feel like you've been able to draw in to your careers?
That's a great question. And I think pretty much anything that teaches you how to work as a team is going to be super helpful. So like in the brochure, it does say that I volunteer with the Seattle Aquarium. I used to volunteer at the Monterey Bay Aquarium when I lived down in California. And most of the volunteering that I did wasn't like hands-on, like animal stuff. It was going out and talking to high school students about science just in general. And I spent a couple of years as a science mentor, like bringing groups of 4 high school students through the academic year where they like did their own research project in a year and like presented on it. And that was super fulfilling. And just, I got to hang out with these kids once a week for almost the entire year. And it was really meaningful to at least, talk to people within the community and like figure out what they're interested in. I had one kid who was doing such a great job, like reading the papers that I had highlighted for them. And I was like, oh man, are you going to college next year? What are your plans? And he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to study theater. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're doing great with science, but like, that's cool. So I think, yeah, basically teamwork building skills, whether that's like playing on a sports team or joining robotics club and learning how to like work together towards a common goal, I think is like super helpful just in general.
And let's go ahead and open it up to the other panelists. Is there any activities you did outside of like STEM fields or that kind of bolstered your STEM career? Yeah.
I guess one thing I'd add to this, I guess this is kind of STEM-y related, but advice I have is just like try a bunch of different things. And I think it really takes trying something to figure out that if you like it or you don't like it. I think that's kind of some like big steps I made like throughout my undergrad and figuring out kind of exactly what I wanted to do was joining different clubs, spending time in the club and realizing like, yeah, this really isn't for me. That's kind of turned me away from like mechanical engineering initially towards like the data science path that I'm on now. But I think really kind of getting involved in activities beyond just your classes is a really great way to kind of explore what is the stuff that you actually want to be doing after you graduate, whether that's, going to a grad school or in a job in the future. But really just trying a lot of different things. I think really being able to figure out you don't like something is almost more value or as valuable as figuring out something that you really do like.
I think maybe my pitch on it would be try not to overstress too much for the sake of like resume building. I think especially like the pre-med track, in my impression from friends who went down that, is sort of a case where you really need to like check a lot of boxes on extracurriculars. There are other professions where that's true. My experience and what I've seen from others is it like research itself isn't really one of those professions, which is nice. I think like if you have X hours of your life to pour into something that you want to like be career boosting, like do research or do academics or sort of do something directly science STEM related. If you want to do something not that's just like to enrich you as a person, like do that. Like I think there's a lot of things that I've done in my life that like indirectly boosted me for science, but I did them because they were fun. Like I did a bunch of like community theater growing up, and that's like helpful now. That's like easier for me to like talk in front of a stage. I'm not afraid of crowds. It's just like a nice reflex. But I don't think it was worth like a couple hundred hours to do theater as like public speaker training. Like I did it because I liked it, and it's like a fun perk of like who I am. And like ditto for like sports I played or anything like that. That like you absolutely get huge growth as a person from those, and that's really really good. But I would just like really urge like don't freak out about it. I guess don't like stress it as like a resume building checkbox. Just like do it because it's fun and you will get boost from it. But they come in soft ways. Was my experience at least.
Yeah, one of the things I did as an undergrad was get involved in an honor society, which sounds more prestigious than it was. But I was president of like a local group, and mostly what we did was work on different community projects. There's one really cool project where we like worked with the university to print like 3D print a prosthetic hand that a company would then send to mostly kids who needed like prosthetics. But since kids are like, they grow so much and change, it's like, and if they don't have the financial means, it's really hard to like maintain having prosthetics. So 3D printing was a great way to do that. That being said, I think what that taught me a lot was how to lead a project from start to finish. And I think that is really important, very much for research, but also just for any career choice, is like learning how to lead, learning how to push a project and be that force to push it, but also understand when you personally are no longer capable of getting past whatever it is you're stuck on, and learning like what are the methods and ways to draw in other people and collaborations and just acquire the multiple different skills that are needed to get a product from start to finish in a successful way. So I think anything that gets you into like a project management position in an official or unofficial way, I think is very beneficial.
I have a little bit of input kind of building off of what David had mentioned about your hobbies kind of contributing to, I guess, your work as a scientist. But I feel like any kind of hobby that takes a lot of time to maybe learn, or maybe it's a little bit difficult for you, but that's kind of like the fun of it, like kind of helps your ability as a scientist to tackle problems. So like for me, music is one of my best like kind of creative outlets. So I love playing guitar and bass, and I play in like a band with a bunch of other graduate student nerds. And so, but like when you're playing music, like you have to, songs that you really want to master, or things that you want to learn, or techniques are going to take a lot of time. And when you start doing them, it's not going to come really quickly and easily, just like how sometimes an experiment doesn't work the very first time that you try it, but you kind of have to just keep your head up and keep going. And so I'd say like, our hobbies kind of contribute to our capabilities as a scientist for sure.
Yeah, we've got a question over here. And I think we have time for one more question, and then before we leave, we've got the bathrooms over here to the left. We're going to go up one floor. There's elevators straight ahead, and then stairs up to the Vista Cafe right above us, where we have pizza and refreshments up there. So we encourage you to stay and have a conversation after the session closes. But
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I have two questions.
Great.
So first, I'm getting advices on doing graduate school, and so right now I want to know. So, what is a better way? So, should I work for a couple of years before I apply for graduate school, or should I go straight into graduate school? And another thing is that, so I've been thinking about graduate school since I was like really little, and you just mentioned you read a lot of resumes. So I want to know what part of resumes stands out the most to you.
Great question. I'm going to put it to the panelists first. Does anybody have any?
Yeah, I'll quickly talk about the first question. So I didn't know I wanted to do graduate school until like my senior year. And then I was like, I don't know what the options are. So because of that, that is why I took initially 2 and then actually 3 years off between my undergraduate and graduate school. So I think that question depends on how confident you are in your decision to go to graduate school, and also your understanding of what graduate school entails. Because it's a very big commitment that is not sparkly. It's like it's something that you have to know you want to do it, because it's something like I don't know, not to get too like metaphorical, but something like, like in your soul, like this is something that gives me purpose and drives me. So I think those are like questions to ask yourself of like, how confident am I that science is what I want to do, and how confident do I feel in applying to the programs that I'm going to apply to, and knowing that those programs are going to fit me well. So I think those are just some of the things to think about. But I'm also a huge proponent of regardless taking a year off, just because undergrad is a lot. Like I was exhausted at the end of my undergrad. And so just taking a year off, if you have the financial means, I know it's hard. Taking a break of some sort, I think, is a benefit, one like regardless. But.
Yeah, I think I would probably agree with Ben. So I did go straight into my master's program after undergrad, and to be honest, the only reason that I went through that master's program is because I didn't get into any of the PhD programs that I applied to. And as Adam mentioned earlier, I ended up having to pay for my master's degree out of pocket. And I do wish that I had instead taken a year, maybe 2, to really think about and figure out how to better apply for the next year. Because I was feeling pretty nervous about not having a plan at the end of my senior year. And I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, but I wasn't sure where exactly or how to do it, because I did not I didn't take my own advice and ask enough questions about like how to go about the process and what it entailed. And yeah, so I'm also a huge proponent, I think, of taking a year off.
Cool. So I guess my take on it would be echoing a lot of the sentiment here of like when you're ready, which like may sound like me punting on the answer, but it's probably the truth. I went straight through from undergrad to grad school, and that was definitely the right decision for me. But that was as much as anything that like at the start of undergrad, I kind of got lucky and guessed with what turned out to be the right answer of what I was interested in. So like my undergrad like had a really nice program that like put like little foolish freshman me in a lab that nurtured me from like the first couple months of undergrad. So I had like 4 years of research experience. I got very lucky with the lab that they were some really great opportunities there. So like I got to the end of undergrad with a very clear vision of like having tried different parts of research. I knew what I wanted. I was ready for it. So it was the right thing to do. But that would have been like absolutely disastrous to go straight into like the wrong program of like PhDs are long, they are grinding even under the best of circumstances. And you can just like end up going down a road that isn't right for you. So just like lives are long, careers are long, and like waiting a year or 2 or more is really not a big deal. It is a bad thing to go down a path that is wrong for you. So I'd say just like make sure you're ready, and when you're ready, you're good to go. And I wouldn't fret the exact time as long as it's the spot where you need to be, where you want to be.
Yeah, thank you so much. So right now, I'm pretty certain that I really like research. I'm in a genome science lab, just like next door, the Brewer Raman lab. And but like I'm interested in a lot of different things, but I didn't have opportunity to try it out. So And I know that doing like graduate school is kind of like in a very, very like narrow field, as we just mentioned. And I want to make sure I really like that field before I go into it. So I'm kind of like now leaning towards work for a little bit. So for me to give myself some time to find out and make sure I wanted to dedicate 5 to 7 years on research. So what do you recommend me to do like during the period of like years I'm going to find out what my, what my interests are?
Yeah, I guess I would say, and obviously I'm not in PhD programs, I have a different perspective than the rest of the panelists here, but I think just reiterating what they said, like, yeah, grad school is not going anywhere, so it's okay to kind of take a little bit of time. I think also, and you guys all might be able to touch on this, but I think within GS, there's like some rotations that you might do in your first year or so to kind of explore different labs. You have other ideas, but also like you're mentioning, you could go into a like just a job, try something out that might be adjacent to what you're like most interested in, and that can kind of help guide your, I guess, what you want to do for a PhD program, because you're right, it is a big commitment.
With these, I heard about your classes expiring, biology and chemistry. That's something that we need to consider too. Yeah, so like, yeah.
I don't think they do. I know, so I have a really good friend that just got into a chemistry master's program, and then she did well enough and wanted to go to the PhD program that it transferred over. She did have to do a few extra credits while as a master's student before transferring to the PhD program, but she had credits that were like 15 years old that did transfer. So I'm not sure about that, but we could look into it. Oh, they did. Yeah.
I think it's pretty program dependent too. So like, yeah, I think, I'm not sure what it is for genome sciences. Lizzie, did you?
Yeah, so the thing to think about is that major types of PhDs have sciences. One, they're called umbrella programs. And ones are more specialized. GS is a very specialized, very focused, only a set number of labs. Whereas in cell biology, which is another PhD, it's more umbrella. But I've noticed that those kinds of programs, they tend to coursework from other universities more readily than a very specialized PhD. Like I know for ours, we all have to take the exact same set of curriculum. So thinking about finding a PhD, want to transfer back, might have better luck. And the umbrella programs, like your next year, could be in the GS lab. Both of my mentors are right? So it's not a inherent sense, but it's why you have to be so careful about which program. Very important.
Yeah, so for anybody online, if we didn't pick that up on Mike, so the question was about whether credits expire and whether they apply towards different programs. And so different graduate programs are either very specialized, like genome sciences at University of Washington. Credits need to be special for that program, whereas other programs, graduate programs at the university, like molecular cell biology, I know the neuroscience program is one of these as well, where credits may have a little bit looser interpretation for getting into those graduate programs. And so it would be beneficial to really look into the details of that program and whether or not you have the prerequisites for it. Some really great questions, and I think we can keep the conversation going upstairs and talk about it more. But before we close for this part of the session, I just want to thank the panelists for giving us their time and their insight on what it's like to have a career in genomics. So let's give them a round of applause.